Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, February 15, 2025, time in Texas, about 1 p.m. Thanks for hitting the like button that helps my channel to grow. Some of the things we'll cover in this flash update. God, the American people, and President Trump together. Eradicate the cartels, split with NATO, and pursue peace in Ukraine. Some of my sources are God in the Bible, Patriot Subscriber, Beston Taylor, San Diego Tribune, Hal Turner, Doug Hagman, Plus. So let's get started. We have this going on. Now, recently on Daily Excellence, an excerpt from some information put out by Mike from around the world. We know he's regularly on Pastor Paul Begley's Thursday night program. We believe Mike works for the federal government. Mike knows stuff. Says this about ash volcanoes coming very soon, and I put out information in my previous video about 3 volcanoes watching the watch status of volcanoes, 2 in Alaska and 1 in Hawaii today. So we have 3 U.S. volcanoes at watch status. And Mike's information is that there is a magma bulge in the seafloor. And this is going to be active globally. We also see this working in around the island of Santorini between Greece and Israel and other areas. And Mike says there's going to be a big impact on the northern hemisphere. The ground zero areas are Italy, Alaska, and China. And I believe Italy also has an active volcano working right now. And this will impact the Aegean Sea near the Santorini Island. So that's going on. And he references Revelation 8:6. The first trumpet will burn up 1/3 of the trees on the earth. So let's ask God to mitigate that. Okay. From Hal Turner. So President Trump is now getting his appointees over various departments in place. Over the Department of Education, President Trump's secretary is Linda M. McMahon, who put this out Wednesday, a notice to all education departments in all 50 states that all DEI platforms and programming are to be taken down. And they have 14 days to do this. So the notice went out February 14. So by the end of February, all 50 states are to remove from all public schools any reference to DEI. So that's going on. And we have this from Hal Turner's sources. President Trump, Wednesday, to all departments, all agencies, to fire all employees who are on probation by Friday. That was to happen. And the number Hal Turner had received by Friday is 300,000. And we know that 75,000 had already taken buyouts also. So that's already a reduction of the federal government by 375,000 individuals. So that's going on. Promises made, promises kept. Now, Larry Taylor on Beston Taylor on Before It's News, and also on Stuart Best's Substack last night, Friday night. Larry put this forth. He had a word from the Lord something significant is to happen in 2 months. And his reckoning, the end of the 2-month period would be February 25. So Larry said you might want to think about, being at home on that date. So we'll see. We know things are heating up in the U.S. and Mexico, South America, and around the world. Doug Hagman interviewed Josh Metz, who has a background in Intel, who said, this came out February 12, so about February 12, the government of Mexico, their Senate, okays the entry of the U.S. military into Mexico. So we see Mexico getting on board with President Trump and the American people. And who can forget that God is in this? God despises trafficking, he despises drugs, and so on. Now we have this from BORZIKKMAN. This came out on February 13. President Trump, in a recent conversation with Z and a recent conversation with President Putin of Russia, puts forth new information, and that is President Trump agrees with President Putin that Zelensky is not the legitimate leader of Ukraine. His elected term ended last May, and then Zelensky, like a dictator, said no elections. President Trump puts this forth with President Putin that a signer on behalf of Ukraine to a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia could be General Sikorsky, currently the head of the Ukraine military. And President Trump calls for new elections in Ukraine. And President Trump and the U.S. back the previous leader of Ukraine's military, who's currently an ambassador to the UK on behalf of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny. So that's going on. And we have this. We have that, yes. So one of the things is Ukraine will lose territory. And February 11, President Trump says to Ukraine, I'm sure since President Trump has okayed the signing of the peace agreement with Russia to be General Sikorsky, that possibly General Sikorsky and possibly Zaluzhny are now knowledgeable of talks that are going on between President Trump, President Putin, and Zelensky. And February 11, President Trump says the U.S. wants, and we're to understand, at least 50% ownership of rare earth minerals in Ukraine. We have February 12 that, as this information I just put out became, Zelensky became aware of the U.S.'s position regarding Sikorsky and Zaluzhny. Zelensky had a nervous breakdown. And Macron, the leader of France, and Starmer, the leader of the UK, pushed back against President Trump and Russia. So we see a split with the US and NATO coming, and Europe. Macron to President Trump. Macron, the leader of France, says to President Trump, you should not contact Zelensky. Europe can handle this. And Macron says to President Trump, the U.S. betrays Europe. And Europe, according to Macron, Europe will then sabotage any peace talks between the U.S. and Russia. And Macron, ding dong, is saying this publicly. So, if this comes about, it's believed by President Trump and the U.S. military that Russia will simply take all of Ukraine. So we have that going on. And in that recent meeting of NATO in Munich, Germany, and I referenced that in my previous video about a great speech by President Trump's Vice President, J.D. Vance, regarding the clampdown of Europe on basic freedoms of its citizens. So we have this coming out. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and recall, Vice President J.D. Vance was to meet with, and President Trump's peace team was to meet with Russia's peace team in Munich. But Germany said no and wouldn't allow the Russian team in. Now we have this coming out from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Criticizes the speech by J.D. Vance and says, "We do not accept this. No, it appears that the leaders of European nations really want to function as dictators and clamp down on freedom of speech by its citizens, freedom of religion by its citizens, freedom of elections by its citizens." Yeah. And Germany supports, according to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Germany will support Ukraine as long as it takes. And Germany is going to reform their budget with regard to defense, indicating that possibly they're going to do additional spending for defense, but possibly not aligned with NATO. Now we have this from the San Diego Union Tribune. Recall in my previous video, President Trump had put out that the U.S., he had signed a executive order, January 20, to eradicate the cartels, who were named terrorist groups. And we had, in the last couple of days, President Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, naming certain cartel groups located in Mexico, Central America, and South America as terrorist groups. And part of the executive order included they must be eradicated. So recently, the cartels named as terrorist groups now are in Mexico, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, Gulf Cartel, Del Noreste, Carteles Unidas, Familia Michoacana, in Central America, Maria Salvatrucha, and in South America, Tren de Aragua. So it appears that the U.S. military and the Mexican military are now gearing up to eradicate these cartel groups named as terrorists. And we have this from the San Diego Union Tribune. The U.S. military and the Mexican military have now deployed thousands of troops on both sides of the U.S. and Mexican border. The Mexican military is taking action. And recently, in the San Diego, Tijuana area, the Mexican military seized drugs And the name of the exercise for the Mexican military is Operation Northern Border. And they recently seized near San Diego 1,242 kilograms of drugs, including 8.6 kilograms of fentanyl. And recently, in the past few days, the Mexican military has also seized 537 kilograms of meth, 60 kilograms of cocaine. This was at the Ole Mesa crossing. They were hidden inside a trailer. President Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, thanks Mexican Foreign Secretary Juan de la Fuente for their enforcement and cooperation with the U.S. along the border. And we have this, Breitbart, today. Zelensky, speaking in Germany at the Munich meeting, said Zelensky calls for Europe to form its own European armed forces, separate from NATO, just in case the U.S. refuses to defend Europe. And these European armed forces, according to Zelensky, is not to replace NATO. And Zelensky states that this week, President Trump told Zelensky that President Trump had had a phone call with President Putin. And Zelensky says to the collected NATO European group, not once did President Trump mention Europe being involved in the peace talks. And we have this from Macron, the leader of France. He's going to lobby Europe to put forth its own armed forces of Europe, and also that NATO has to be involved in these peace talks between the U.S. and Russia regarding Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not NATO. So we see backstabbing, don't we? So it's good to pray for America, President Trump, and world peace. This concludes my flash. I love you, and I'll see you soon.